just this like incredible magic that you get to just like, land yourself in somebody's life for a couple of minutes. You feel like this fairy godmother of like radio money, and then they're like, oh my God, now what? You're like, don't worry, like someone's going to call you back and the money will be in your bank account. Exactly. So like having the ability to be able to do that is like, incredible. I wouldn't want to do anything else really.
From Ministry of Work, welcome to Greater Manchester's Greatest Minds podcast, a show about Greater Manchester's pioneers, entrepreneurs and visionaries, and the stories that brought their ideas to life. I'm Eddie Whittingham, and on today's show we sit down with Hattie Pearson. You might know her as the voice from Hits Radio, the only national commercial radio station in Manchester, but Hattie is also a DJ, voiceover artist and now triathlonist. Hattie is someone who has made it to where she is today by saying yes to opportunities and tackling challenges head on. As one of the first girls to take part in a new concept at an all-boys school, she had a pretty unique childhood, good and bad, but one that ultimately equipped her with the skills and experience unlike most others. Very, very few are able to break into the crazy competitive world of radio. To do that, you have to be one of the very best.
Okay, so I grew up in Berkshire in a little town called Newbury, which isn't known for much apart from Vodafone headquarters. Everyone that lives in Newbury either works for Vodafone or knows somebody that does. But yeah, it's kind of very small town vibes, and I knew that I didn't want to be there forever. I actually went to an all-boys boarding school, which is... probably quite a surprising fact for a lot of people. They actually wanted... My brother was there at the time, a school called Bradfield College, and they wanted to become a co-educational school, and they kind of, I think, approached like people who were already there and their parents and were like, anyone got any girls that want to help us out? And so I was like, I'll do it. And really loved the school and wanted to be a part of like that guinea pig process. And so I think that has definitely played like a big part in who I am and the way that I behave and act.
So for context then, how many girls were in your year, I guess?
So when I started in year 9, there were only 2 of us.
Wow.
And year 9 was like the bottom, the first year at secondary school, and then in year 10 I think another 2 joined, and then in year 11 another couple joined, but then they all left, and then I carried on through sixth form. So I was actually the first girl to like go the whole way through the school. Wow. And then as we kind of went up the years, more and more girls kind of came up underneath us. But yeah, when I think back about that, it was obviously it molded sure. As a young person between the age of 12 to 18, that is, especially as a young woman and being thrown into that environment. I can look back on it and be like, wow, okay, like all of those things happened. Like as an adult, there's a lot of hindsight. I'm not saying it was the wrong decision, but my parents...
But it's definitely shaped.
It's definitely shaped me. And obviously I'm very privileged to have had a brilliant education, which I'm very grateful for. But yeah, it was an experience.
I can well imagine.
For a lot of reasons. And I think it probably made me, it made me quite tough. I couldn't... am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, absolutely.
It made me pretty tough. I didn't take any shit. And I think, you can't in that environment. So I had to stick up for myself a lot. But at school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was very sporty, very active. And I had to keep up with the boys as well, because it was either play the sports with the boys or play with the sixth form girls, And when I'm in a hockey team with girls that are 5 years older than me, when you're 12 playing with 18-year-old girls, there's a big difference.
Sure.
So usually it was just getting stuck in with the lads, having a hockey ball whacked at you as hard as they can because they think it's funny. And it's actually not that funny and it really hurts. But I think, all of those kind of experiences, I think have definitely like shaped what I wanted to do and how I see the world and things. I think I'm able to put a lot of it through therapy and stuff, a lot behind me. Like compartmentalize it. But I think it kind of gave me that courage and confidence to know that like things are going to be quite hard, but I can really do whatever I wanted, and I can be a lot better than a lot of men who think that they can like push their weight around. I think there were a lot of like very basic like lessons that I learned.
Probably a lot younger than most.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then presumably at that age, any interest in like radio and stuff like that, or did that come later?
Yeah, so like I said, I was very sporty. I loved that. I loved art. And I think I wasn't stupid, but I wasn't like top of the class. I was like, you know, A set for some things, B set for other things. And I was really like school. I was always a kid that like put their hand up in class and stuff like that. But also somebody that would get into trouble or be easily like swayed by the kids that were messing about. And recently, although it's not a formal diagnosis, there's been conversations about having ADHD, which I think, if you know me personally, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or even a specialist to tell you that. Like I do have a lot of those traits, but now I look back on like how I was at school, like that is also very clear as to why I behaved in certain ways or why I excelled in certain things rather than others. But yeah, I loved art. I love languages. My dad actually lives in France and married a French woman like 25 years ago or something. So I've always enjoyed French and always loved traveling. I wouldn't say I'm fluent. I could probably get by, but I'm not quite fluent. And yeah, I loved art and textiles, drama, and like, yeah, just always said yes to all the extracurricular things. I think I was always just one of those people that said yes to everything. Like I wanted all the opportunities and experiences, and then I could like rule things out. But at school, I suppose I wanted to like be a fashion designer. I wanted to be a lawyer at one point, a police officer. There was a lot of things that I wanted to be. And then it wasn't really until I went to uni at Manchester University to study English language. So yeah, I did English language, French, and textiles for A-levels, I think. Thought, I'll go to Manchester and study English language because I know I really enjoy it, which I did at school. And at that point, I'd applied to do an art foundation because I thought I might want to go into fashion. And I was like, it's not for me. Don't want to do that. I'll go to do English language, and then I've got something to fall back on. I know whilst I'm there, I can still do all these things that I think would be really cool, like student TV, student radio, write for the student newspaper. And that's where I kind of first started to fall in love with media, really.
Yeah, so you actually tried quite a few of the different things whilst at university.
Yeah, that was how I kind of got into it. Shout out to Fuse FM at Manchester University. And then just got work experience from there, really, whilst I was at uni. 7 or 8 hours of lectures a week. It's not much, is it?
No,
I don't know what else you're meant to do with your
yeah.
time, especially with someone like me. I can't sit still. I always want to be doing something, meeting new people. So I kind of got work experience at various places, including XFM, which is now Radio X. Just doing work experience there, work experience at the BBC, which then kind of led into freelance work whilst I was still at uni as an assistant producer. And I was like meet and greet as a runner on BBC Breakfast, which was really cool because you just got to like meet people, all the celebrities that sit on the red sofa. Like I'd meet them at the door once, or meet them at the taxi, get them out of the taxi, put them through hair and makeup, and have a bit of a chat to them. So like all these really cool people that you see on the telly, like I got to meet, which, straight, I was still at uni. I was like 20, 21, 22. And I absolutely loved that. And just kind of said yes to anything and everything I could, really, at that point, working on a lot of various shows at BBC Radio Manchester, then picked up some freelance work at Six Music, working on Craig Charles's Funk and Soul show, and Weekend Breakfast, and kind of just did everything, and then got my own presenting gig because I always knew I wanted to do presenting rather than producing. And I won the Student Radio Award in 2012, which got me a one-off show on Radio 1, and then of just fell into the presenting side of things, got a show on, again, XFM as it was at the time. I was doing early Weekend Breakfast. So like 3 till 7 a.m, Saturday, Sunday morning, which was awful.
Tough shift.
Yeah, for like 3 years. And I think like every radio presenter, you have to do that they call it the graveyard slot. And if you haven't done it, it's like a rite of passage.
You're not a proper presenter.
Yeah, exactly. So I did that, and then XFM turned into Radio X, and I got moved to earlies during the week, which is Monday to Friday, 1 till 4 a.m. So again, it was still like awful hours. But by then it was digital and like national. So that was really a kind of cool step up. And And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. These earlies are killing me. So I actually left without anything to go to. And
Did
then,
Brave.
it was quite brave. I think, that was a really tough decision. But I was like, I could probably just sit here.
Yeah, and kind of coast.
Yeah, or like, unless like opportunities in radio, especially presenting, like are few and far between, and they're getting even like less and less because of the way that radio is networked. So I kind of just was like, well, if this is it, so what? Like, I'll find something. I had to.
That's interesting, yeah, because you're effectively working night shifts at that point, right?
Yeah, and like I think by that point it had been like 4 years or something that I've been on those shifts. But it's like, even when you're in your early 20s, I was like, I can't do this for much longer. And so, I left and I approached the program director at Key 103 at the time, which is now Hits Radio, which is where I am. And was like, look, have you got anything? And usually if you're out of a job, you should, hopefully, if you're, I guess, good enough, be able to pick up the odd cover shift or whatever. And that's kind of how it started. And then picked up some weekend shows, did that for a bit. Again, working weekends, awful hours, really. But at least it was daytime at the weekend. And then Key 103 turned into Hits Radio and became national digital. And I got earlies again, 4 till 6 a.m. Monday to Friday. So at least it wasn't the middle of the night, but it was still really early, I was still getting up.
What time are you getting up for that?
Yeah, like 2:30.
And going to bed at what, like 8?
Yeah, or like sleeping in the afternoon a bit. Like splitting your sleep like that is just, it's savage. And then I did that for 1 year, and then my boss just one day was like, do you want to go for a coffee? And I was like, that's really weird. Like, I'd never asked that, but I just wasn't expecting it at all. Especially after only doing that show for a year. And he was like, do you want afternoons? And I was like, oh my God, yes, of course. Like that's like every radio presenter's dream. Like, I've literally been grafting for 10 years, like saying no to friends' birthday parties and not going to weddings and stuff like that because I can't, because I'm only working weekends. If I take a weekend off, that's like a week's wages, you know? So, and like all of those early nights and late nights and split sleep, I was like, oh, yeah. This is the best. Yeah. And that's what I've been doing. So I've been on afternoons on Hits Radio 1 till 4 p.m, Monday to Friday, for like 3 years now. At the end of 2024, it'll be 3 years. So yeah, it's always that whenever people are like, oh, you got the dream show, I'm like, yeah, I really do. You do what I did for 10 years and then you can have it as well.
Well, it's the classic overnight success, right? It's always 10 years, literally in the making. Interesting about your job now then, like, it probably sounds like the dream job to a lot of people. It probably sounds easy, but the reality of that is different. And I can imagine, like, from a creativity point of view, it's quite hard to maintain that, is it? Yeah,
I mean, the world of radio, the industry has drastically changed, like the landscaping with networking in recent years. And I am in a really fortunate position. I'm on one of the biggest networks, and the radio listener figures are great. And again, that's testament to hopefully me being all right in my job, but also the team around me. My producer, I couldn't do it without him. He kind of keeps the ship afloat. Without him, it would be a total car crash. Then not just that, like, the marketing team and like everyone at the music team and everyone you can see the presenter on the show, but it wouldn't happen unless everyone else is there. And I do really see it as a team effort. The socials team, everyone plays their part. It's like any job. But yeah, creatively, I guess in the world that I'm in, like commercial hit music, it's very tight, like the rotation of songs and the kind of stuff that we have to deliver. But it's finding a way of doing that in a creative way. So yeah, I might have to talk about, a new phone on this network and how we've got a prize for it. But rather than just reading that and it sounding like a script, it's like, okay, well, how can I do that in a way that is authentic to me? Like, what can I bring to that? Or, we've got a big cash competition or whatever. And like, I've kind of been known for doing that on my show as well. A competition called Make Me a Winner and giving away like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds and, just making that cool and changing somebody's life in a moment. So that is like, that's the best bit of the job because it's just this like incredible magic that you get to just like, land yourself in somebody's life for a couple of minutes. And you feel like this fairy godmother of like radio money. And then they're like, oh my God, now what? You're like, don't worry. Like someone's going to call you back and the money will be in your bank account. Exactly. So like having the ability to be able to do that is like, incredible. I wouldn't I wouldn't want to do anything else really.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I love that. And what about, have you had any, not necessarily bad moments, but any embarrassing moments you must have had in 10 years on air?
On air, I don't think I've ever sworn on air,
good effort.
which is quite. I mean, the thing, it depends. Lots of bits aren't live for various reasons, but like the calls, they're very rarely live. Especially if we're getting somebody on the phone and we don't know what they're going to say or who they are. Like it's like we usually record that and then put it out. And that's kind of the magic of radio, I suppose. And it has to sound slick, but I don't think there's ever been an embarrassing. No, I don't think so. Okay. Not on air, anyway. I'm sure there's been other embarrassing at various points, but yeah.
We spoke about it before we sort of came on air here, so to speak. I think obviously the industry you're in is tough. Like to get to that level that you're at is really difficult. Like, what do you see some of the challenges even being in the next few years for presenters, for example?
Well, I think, like I say, the landscape is really changing. Podcasts weren't a thing, even 10 years ago, like how podcasts have grown and the audio world is just a very different place. Whereas, 20 years ago, all we had was radio, and that's just not the case now. So listeners, audiences have a lot more choice. So that in itself is a challenge, like making sure that people are still listening to the radio, because ultimately in commercial radio, if we don't have listeners, that doesn't translate to, advert sales, because the clients and commercial partners won't see any value in us, so they won't spend with us. So we won't have any budget, and then we don't get paid. It's that's how the business in radio works. So I guess, again, that comes back to making sure that the sales team are doing all they can and that we're doing a good job of selling the products. And it's like this big team kind of effort. But I guess I can't really remember the question, or I went off on a tangent there.
But do you feel the pressure, I think, like, as obviously knowing that there's quite a lot of weight carried on it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's things that matter that don't matter anymore. I like the social numbers as well, translating the listener figures to, getting views on socials, or how important like social media is to radio. Whereas again, like 10 years ago, it didn't matter. It was like, maybe post a picture of you in the radio station. But it's like people that just because you've got, 1 million followers on Instagram, it doesn't mean that you're a good radio presenter, and vice versa. Yeah. Just because you're a radio presenter doesn't mean that you've necessarily got the value on social media. They're two completely different things.
Yeah, because that's interesting, because obviously, back in the day, the radio presenter, that was the personal brand almost, wasn't it? Whereas now people are building personal brands, on Instagram, and might be Instagram first, then try and get into radio, for example. Yeah,
exactly. And there's a lot of that. You see a lot of people that already have a following, or who are famous musicians who will, get shows on networks and stuff. And you can understand why that's happening. Sure. But from somebody who's like, who's a radio presenter through and through, there can be frustrations in that of like, this is my livelihood. I'm not going to, do that because you can't, because you're a radio presenter. You're not a multi-million like followed influencer doing whatever, or you haven't sold like billions of records in a band before getting this job. So it's finding like how to ride that wave and just hoping for the best, because like ultimately I guess you're not in control of making the decisions. It's like you're on the network until the boss decides they don't want you anymore. Like you're only as good as your last show. They say that. So
that's quite a heavy weight to carry, that.
Yeah, it is. But again, it's like, well...
But also, it is what it is.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm in my dream job, and I always say whenever my contract comes round for renewal, it's like, if it doesn't get renewed or they don't want me, oh, well, like obviously I want to stay, but sure. I've had a great innings, and if it's all going to end tomorrow, then I'll figure something out. Like, I'm sure I will. Yeah. But for now, it's just like, just carry on trying your best and don't mess anything up.
And I suppose it's interesting as well, even what you've done so far, what opportunities it's presented you with. Because you mentioned you're really into fitness, for example. Yeah,
so like over the last couple of years, and this again has kind of come about because I'm now on the show that I'm on, because I'm on afternoons I'm able to, if I was still on like earlies or whatever, I don't think I'd be able to have the mental or physical like space to do it. But I kind of fell in love with triathlons a couple of years ago, and things have kind of spiraled a little bit. It was just a hobby and I was just really enjoying it. And like kind of documenting that as like somebody in their 30s who's like fallen in love with this like new thing and that is really passionate about it, and kind of wanted to share that and hopefully along the way like encourage or inspire others. And that's kind of what's been happening. And so over the last couple of years, there's been a few like brand collaborations and stuff that's kind of resulted from that, including working with Nike Trail and sports shoes. I just did my first ultra marathon last weekend out in Madeira as like an ambassador for those guys. So that's really cool. And
could you not pick an easier way though to make money? Like doing an ultra marathon seems like a lot of effort.
Yeah, probably not the easiest way to earn money. It's taken a lot of hours.
Wouldn't be my choice. Yeah.
Maybe that's a good point. Maybe I should think of it.
Maybe we should do like that. Sponsor me for the 100 meters or something like that.
But I think that's the thing. Like having those kind of partnerships and stuff. For me, it's like I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
I'm not the kind of person. I'm not a professional athlete either. So it's not like I'm not taking it seriously. Like I do take it really seriously, but in the sense of, I'm just trying my best. Like if I can do it, like
and that's the point, right?
Yeah,
that's the message.
Exactly. It's like people are like, oh wow, it's so inspiring. I'm like, well, but that's the point. Like you can do it as well. Like I'm not coming from, I wasn't like a track runner when I was 15 and running like 10K in 40 minutes. Like I can't do that. I'm probably better than average, but that's because I put like years of hard work into it and I am improving, but it's also, there's kind of no pressure. It's not like I've got, a brand behind me that's like, you have to deliver this, otherwise we're going to drop you. It's not about that. It's about encouraging more people to the start line and like sharing that story and being like myself with that. So yeah, that's a really cool thing that's happened, which I didn't even expect. Like
it's like a really cool byproduct, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, like I say, it's happened really organically, and it hasn't felt forced at all. So I'm really enjoying that aspect of it as well. And I think, just from a kind of business like perspective as well, it's good to have other things to like revenue streams and incomes. And again, the world is changing. I do have a club night that I've been running for, well over 10 years, like 12 years now. And I haven't put on as many events in recent years, and the hospitality industry is just getting harder and harder. And even I did have something kind of booked in for New Year, and then it was literally last week. Luckily, we hadn't announced anything or like booked people or paid for anything, but they came to me and we were like, "No, it's not happening. The venue is probably going to close before then." It's just like, this is rubbish. Like, and like putting on events and DJing and stuff is really stressful. And again, for me personally, I'm not sure how much like late nights. I feel like I've done my late nights thing. I'm like, I want to get up at 5 a.m. to go for a run. I don't still want to be up at that time. You can't do both, can you? Yeah, you've kind of got to pick and choose. So, yeah.
It's really interesting. I think the dynamic of clubbing. I grew up clubbing. That's just going to... It might not disappear in Manchester, but it is going to disappear maybe where you grew up, where I grew up.
Yeah, it's really sad. I do think... I think, young people just aren't as bothered about going out to those kind of places. I think social media has a big answer to, how much we are on our phones, all of that kind of stuff. But also I think it's not just clubbing, it's like gigs. I think people aren't going to gigs as much. People just aren't bothered about having those experiences in large crowds. I think COVID has got a lot to answer for as well, especially for that younger generation where they were feared into going out. It's like, well, why should we when we can do most things from home? So yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to say, isn't it? There's so much like stats and stuff that, the world has kind of bounced back post-COVID, but I think there will always be those residue things and like cultural, societal things that...
Yeah, and it shapes you, like much like your child, it shapes you into habits and whatever else.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you see as your sort of future? Where do you think you'll be in 5 years' time?
I genuinely have no idea. And that's probably not a very good, any business person would probably be like, that's a dreadful thing to like not have an answer for. And yeah, often people will be like, you should have a plan. I'm like, I don't know, like things kind of seem to work out. And I'm generally quite a very organised person. I like structure, I like routine. So the fact that I don't plan for the future is probably like, it feels like quite out of character.
But I suppose in your industry that's hard, isn't it, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think, like I said earlier, I'm so used to saying yes to any opportunity. And I think now I'm at a point in my career where I don't have to say yes to everything. I can say yes if it feels right or it pays enough or, or a combination of the two. So it's about finding those things that work for me. And I don't know whether I'll still be on this show. I mean, I'd still love to be working in radio, that's for sure. But who knows with the industry? It's really hard to say. Who knows whether I'll be living in this country? I don't know, like the thought of that. And I mean, I'd love to move abroad, I think, but finding a job in radio, presenting specifically abroad could be quite hard. Yeah. I guess in an English-speaking country, maybe a bit easier, but the opportunities are limited.
Sounds like they are very few and far between.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're few and far between in the UK, let alone elsewhere. So who knows? I don't know. I do think perhaps a decision will be made for me, and then it's like, well, I'll have to just figure it out.
See where the land lies there.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be fine. That's my life motto. I'll be fine.
But that's a good approach. I like it. You don't need to plan sometimes because things have a habit of working themselves out. If you're clearly intelligent and apply yourself no matter what. So even if that happened, you're gonna find the right solution out of it.
Yeah, and I do.
It's like backing yourself.
Yeah, and I'm a strong believer of like, you can set yourself up for success. So when, it's not always, there is an element of right place, right time, but when those opportunities arise, you have to be in a position where you can grab that opportunity and actually make the most of it, because you might want to make the most of it, but actually might not be the right time for you if you've not already had the right experience. So when those kind of things come along, if it feels right and you're able to, then you can go for it. But often those opportunities don't align for whatever reason. So it's like making those decisions as and when you can, I guess, to the best of your ability. That sounded quite philosophical, didn't it?
It
did. Yeah, that's probably all I've got in terms of wisdom.
You touched upon your residency earlier then. So you've been doing that for 10 years, did you say?
Yeah, so it's called Girls on Film, and it started in 2012, so the year I graduated, which is how I can always remember the year that I graduated. So yeah, 12 years ago, and it started as a weekly student night, really, at the Deaf Institute. It was every Wednesday. I don't know how to do it every Wednesday. Venue. Yeah, a brilliant venue, which actually I nearly bought once.
What?
When it went up for sale.
I got married there.
Did you? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, there's been a lot of fun events. Like Deaf Institute has so many amazing memories for me. But yeah, it must have been just before COVID hit. So what, 2020? It got put up for sale. And I actually called Sacha Lord and I was like, Sacha, what do you think I should do? And he gave me some advice. He's a great guy. He's always at the end of the phone when you need him. And it didn't go through, and I'm so glad because then COVID hit. And I mean, I'm really pleased to see that the venue is still going.
But imagine, for you personally, that would have been...
Yeah, it would have been a big weight. And my brother is actually a music promoter. He works for AMG, Academy Music Group. And so he's one of the senior promoters for like all the O2 venues in the country. So Ed and I often like work on things together, and that was going to be like something that we were going to explore together. And actually, I don't know whether I should say his name, another guy who owns an independent record label in Manchester, we were having conversations about doing that. So yeah, there was a moment where I could have been the owner of Deaf Institute. And I think that is a big sliding doors moment, actually, like huge. What could have been.
Good and bad.
It could. Yeah,
like an iconic venue, but terrible timing.
Yeah, and I just think like owning a venue is...
It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah, you're just asking for...
It's tougher now than ever, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, I don't know how people make money. They people just don't make money.
It's borderline becoming like a football club almost.
Yeah,
like it's doing it for the love of it, and that's
and I don't have enough money to be able to do that. Like if I was a multi-billionaire or millionaire even, like I just thought, yeah, sure, great venue, cool, I'll like invest some money into it. That's not the case, and I would have probably have had a nervous breakdown if that would have happened. But yeah, I did Girls on Film there for ages, and then I think COVID hitting was actually why Girls on Film stopped there, and then did some stuff at Freight Island, and it kind of moved to monthlies and then quarterlies, and there's been various other kind of pop-up parties since. At various places and festivals, including Kendall Calling.
Oh, amazing.
And it's kind of evolved over those years. It started out as like an 80s night, I guess 12 years ago. That was like the nostalgia. And then a few years in, it kind of evolved to 80s, 90s. And then it just became like a throwback, like big cheesy party. And then evolved into like some drag brunches and drag queens and like performers, and becoming a big like queer inclusive party. Everyone's welcome, and that's kind of what it is today. So I'm not saying it's the end of Girls on Film, but it has certainly had that time, and it's just looking at like where the next venue is, or like where its home is and what it looks like now. And so I'm not losing money because it's a really even if you're selling out venues, you know, it's like you can still be losing money. And it's like making sure that the performers and the other DJs and everyone that's on the bill in those kind of smaller independent venues, that they're earning enough money. It's like, I don't want to be in a position where I'm not paying people fairly, of course. So it's like, unless...
Well, it doesn't help anyone, does it?
No, exactly. So it's, times are really tough for hospitality, and it's like looking at that from a business perspective, and hopefully Girls on Film won't have died its death, but for now, there aren't any parties in the diary.
That's Hattie Pearson, radio presenter and DJ, and what an amazing journey. Thank you so much for listening to the show this week, and please make sure to click the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss a new episode of the show. And don't forget to check out Ministry of Work, where you can sign up for a free trial day. This episode was produced, recorded and edited right here at Ministry of Work, with a special thanks to our studio manager Dan Brown, and of course to you for listening. I'm Eddie Whittingham, and this has been Greater Manchester's Greatest Minds.